have enough, I say notes here for to go through chapter 30. Some of these chapters, one chapter that doesn't involve really David at all, and a couple chapters that are a very quick thing that we'll just do overview of. But anyways, 1 Samuel chapter 26. So if you remember where we left off last time was that, or one of the things we looked at last week, if you remember, was that Saul had said that he was not going to go back after David, and let's just say, long story short, after he had made that promise and everything, it was then that, if you remember, how David went and looked for help, even if it was just a meal, from a very rich man named Nabal. And this guy refused. However, his wife came out. His wife, Michal, came out. I'm sorry, not Michal. Abigail, thank you. I looked at the wrong verse there. And his wife Abigail came out, snuck out so that way Nabal would not know she did it, and brought David plenty. I mean, it was a long list of food and large amounts of that food to feed both David and his men, so as to spare her husband's life. And if you remember, it was not just Nabal that David was then going after as far as for his life. It was going to be all the men of that household that David was going after. And she actually put her own life on the line as well. Because not only did she say, I give you my life, let me take the punishment, okay? But she also had to apologize because her, you'll use the term position, in that time, in that culture, her position as a woman meant that was a big no-no for her to do. To go to David, approach him, and speak to him essentially the way that she did. It was a big no-no for her. So she even apologized to David for stepping out of line, I'll call it, okay? Stepping out of line. However, in the end, it turns out that, of course, David did not, God took care of it, and Nabal got very drunk, and then shortly afterwards, once he found out what his wife had done, he had a heart attack, and then died a few days later. David comes in and takes Abigail as his wife, and he also took Ahinoam for wife as well. And then in verse 44 of chapter 25, we saw that Michal, David's previous wife, who was one of the daughters of King Saul, Saul had already married her, even though she was technically, as far as we can tell, still legally married to David. He had married her off to another man. So anyways, this is where we pick back up. Okay, so remember, Saul had said, okay, David, yes, I see I see I'm in the wrong here. I'm not going to come after you again. We are now at chapter 26. Let's go ahead and start reading right in verse 1. Now the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, Is David not hiding in the hill of course, they had to split this word in half for me, Hachilah, opposite Jeshimon? Then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. I mean, once again, here's King Saul really overcompensating once again. All he's going after is David. David has 600 men. Yeah, these are rough guys, but still, David has 600 men, and Saul takes 3,000 of the top fighting men. Against him. What's that?
After he said he wasn't going to do it.
After he wasn't going to do it. Once again, so he's coming out to seek David again, and once even after he'd already said he wouldn't. Verse 3, and Saul encamped in the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite Jeshimon by the road. But David stayed in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul had indeed come. So David arose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of his army. Now Saul lay within the camp, with the people encamped all around him. Okay, so just to paint you a little picture here, David has heard rumor that Saul is once again looking for him and may even be quite close. So David sends out a couple, we don't know how many, I just say a couple, sends out a couple spies, okay, to find out, is this really true? And sure enough, it was actually very close to them, where they found King Saul and his 3,000 men. So David goes down and went to this place and got within seeing distance, within eye view of them, and mean close enough to where he could actually, where he would actually be able to sort of pick out exactly where Saul and certain people were. Now, this being said, it does not mean that David was so close at this point that he could easily say that is Saul, because he was close enough to discern him, okay? Because the way this worked, okay, Saul had 3,000 men with him, okay? Saul being the king, the way it was, it's not that Saul was right in the front with all of them in back, especially when they slept. They were essentially all, sleeping for the night, they were all encamped around in a circle. It was right in the middle of that circle were always two people. One would be the leader, and in this case was Saul the king, and the other one in this case is Abner. Abner was King Saul's essentially personal bodyguard, okay? This is one where he really did rely and put his own life into the hands of Abner. This being said, because of that, okay, Abner was the type that he would catch 40 winks, whenever he could, okay, even throughout the day. When some of the men would stop to say, if they're marching or whatever, they stop and settle down and eat, okay, Abner would sleep during that time. And then he would eat once they got back up and marched, he would eat while he was marching. The reason for that was his position, he was not allowed to sleep at night. If King Saul was sleeping, that meant he was awake. He was responsible for the king's life. Okay? So here you have David, and he can see enough. He was close enough where he could see that right in the center of the camp were two people, which he knew were going to be. Of course, David's very well known in there, so I'm sure he knew right away too that, okay, there's two guys. I know the one that's laying down is King Saul. The one that is standing, watch, is Abner, okay? And so that's how close he is, and that's where we are. Verse 6, then David answered and said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, who will go down with me to Saul in the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai came to the people by night, and there Saul lay sleeping within the camp, with his spear stuck in the ground by his head, and Abner and the people lay all around him. Then Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day. Now therefore, please let me strike him at once with the spear right to the earth, and I will not have to strike him a second time. Okay, so here we have David went to two people that he trusted very much and said, I want to go down to King Saul, which I'm sure that was kind of a crazy sort of sounding thing, okay? And he goes, which one of you guys want to go with me? Abishai raised his hand. He's like, I'll go with you. They get down, and they were able to sneak through all of those sleeping soldiers. Remember, okay, these soldiers are sleeping. Typically, in that area of the world, they did not. It wasn't the sort of thing like where they had men that carried tents around, and they would set up tents. No, they are literally sleeping under the stars. So they are sneaking through sleeping men. There are no structures, which means Abner, when he is standing guard, okay, he is also, in a way, standing guard over the whole army as well. Well, we will see in a minute how it is that David and Abishai were able to sneak all the way and get to the point where they were right next to Saul. Okay, so anyways, they get right up next to Saul, and they notice the first thing it points out is that Saul's spear was stuck in the ground right next to his head. That is a defensive position. That is a defensive thing, okay? The reason why it was stuck in the ground, some people might say, oh, well, that could dull the head, or, this or that. It really didn't matter. With the way a spear is used, it didn't really have to be that awful sharp to do its job, okay? The reason why the head was stuck in the ground like that, and most likely all the soldiers did that, okay? Reason being, if it's just laying on the ground, how easy is it for say, an invading army to sneak in like David and very gently pick up all the spears and go through, take all the spears, okay? And then all of a sudden wake this army up and the army's defenseless, okay? By sticking the head of the spear in the ground to pull it out, it was always right by their head. The disturbing of the dirt and stone or the ground that it was in was enough to usually always wake them up, okay? So that way, that was a form of protection, a way of defense for them to a point while they were sleeping. And Abishai knows about, has been with David and knows and remembers, I'm sure, about how David when David was given the chance in the cave, David would not kill King Saul. So this time, instead of Abishai going and saying, like the previous time, going and saying, here's your chance, kill him, he instead says, here's your chance, David. Let me kill him. He knew David would not do it. So Abishai says, let me do it. And don't worry, I will take, and what he's saying, I will make sure that it is one blow. I will sink the spear all the way, so that way it would go all the way through him into the ground underneath him, okay? So it would not, and that's what he means by it would not be a second, there would be no second blow. Okay, he's like, I will make this quick, it will be done. However, verse 9, but David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said furthermore, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike him, or his days shall come to die, or he shall go out to battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But please, take now the spear and the jug of water that are by his head, and let us go. So what we see here is David trying to teach Abishai a lesson, okay? That it's not just David's belief that he cannot do it. But David is teaching him that it is, it's not just that David can't do it. David's like, no, you are one of my men, okay? You cannot do it either. Because the blame still would go back down on David. David is the leader. Okay? And by him allowing Abishai to do the deed, the blood would still be on David's hands. Okay? And so he instead says, go ahead, take Abishai, grab his spear, grab his jug of water, grab his canteen as well. That's right there. And this is so that way there would be no denying or no question as to what he had. Here's what we'll look at in a minute. So David took the spear and the jug of water by Saul's head, and they got away. And no man saw or knew it or awoke, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. They were all asleep. One thing, Abner, with his position, if he was ever found sleeping on the job, his exactly, Rosie, yes, his punishment would be death. Okay, just as even, I mean, a good, I'll call it a good example of that is here in the United States. Okay, the Secret Service. Okay, they have sworn an oath to protect the President of the United States, no matter what, even with their own life. Even if they do not like the President, they have to. And if it is found that they have knowingly and willingly allowed the President to be killed on their watch, that they, essentially allowed it in some way, and it is proved to be that way. It's not a thing of, oh, you lose your job. No, you are convicted of treason. With treason comes the death penalty. Okay? So this is something that is essentially practiced not just in, say, Bible times, not just, say, in other countries, even right here in the United States. The same sort of thing is still in practice today. And yet, anyway, so God had put a deep sleep on them. Let's see, let's pick back up verse 13. Now David went over to the other side and stood on the top of a hill afar off, a great distance being between them. And David called out to the people and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, "Do you not answer, Abner?" Then Abner answered and said, "Who are you calling out to the king?" Okay, so essentially what David is saying here when he's just like, "Hey, Abner, you hear me? Can you hear me?" That's essentially what he's saying. At this point, obviously, God has lifted that deep sleep off of him. And he is most likely, I'm sure to him, what he's seeing is he's probably woken up going, okay, everybody's still sleeping. Good. I'm safe. I'm good, okay? I just nodded off for a minute. I'm fine. And then all of a sudden, he hears that voice of David hollering to him. So David said to Abner, in verse 15, "Are you not a man, and who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not guarded your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy your lord the king. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not guarded your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the jug of water that was by his head." So at this point, the picture I have in my head is, he's going and saying this to Abner. I'm sure Abner's looking down like, no, he's King Saul. I can see him breathing. At this point, King Saul, I'm coming up with this because of the next verse we're about ready to read. King Saul's probably starting to stir now because of even Abner is yelling loud enough for David to be able to hear him. And it's at this point, as David is yelling, that picture I have is he's just like, so where's King Saul's spear? David, I'm sure, is holding up that spear. Oh, and what about his water jug? Where are they? You know, so it is now at this point, I'm sure, Abner is starting to shake in his shoes. And it is at this point that Saul, remember I said he was most likely stirring? Well, he is now woken up. Verse 17, then Saul knew David's voice and said, is that your voice, my son David? It is so odd. Because I looked it up thinking, okay, maybe this, you know, sometimes in the old Hebrew, certain words when translated to English are the same word, but they had different meanings. I know we've come across that other times with other words. So I thought, okay, maybe that was this same sort of thing with him saying my son. Maybe that in this case means like my subject or whatever, you know, being that he was king. But no, it is actually the same. Here he is out to hunt for David, and he is actually calling him his son in the literal term as we know it now. Because remember, David and Jonathan had been like best friends. And at one point, King Saul took David under his wing as his own son. He's out here hunting David. And he has the nerve to go and call him son. I just find that kind of odd, I mean, to be honest. Verse 17, and David said, it is my voice, my Lord, O king. And he said, why does my Lord thus pursue his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in my hand? Now therefore, please, let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if it is the children of men, may they be cursed before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from sharing in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. So now, do not let my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord, for the king of Israel has come out to seek a flea, as when one hunts a partridge in the mountains. Okay, so I'm just going to, we're not going to look at all the specifics. There's a lot there that really doesn't pertain, okay, quite as much, or hold a lot of importance, I'll say, in the type of study we're doing on David there. However, I do want to pick out the second half, verse 20 there, where it says, the king of Israel, so King Saul, has come out to seek a flea when one hunts a partridge in the mountains. You might see, depending on which version of the Bible you're using, it may use different terms other than flea or partridge. The picture that David is putting out here, this thing, is what he's saying is, David's like, I am insignificant. You have much more important things that you should be doing, okay? You are bringing an army, a huge army, away from Israel, away from what you're supposed to be doing, to come after a little old me. You know, essentially, this is foolish. This is a waste, essentially, is what he is saying to him. Then Saul's obviously seen all this, okay? He has at this point seen, okay, my spear is gone, my water, you know, David has once again, okay, spared my life. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will harm you no more, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Indeed, I have played the fool and erred exceedingly. I think at this point, okay, we can say that this is a little more heartfelt. This is not in a private setting. He is in the middle of his whole army yelling over top of his men. I'm sure at this point too, most of his men have woken up. Most, if not all of them. They are hearing their own king saying to what they view as a criminal, okay? Saying this, their king saying to David, I am a fool in doing this. David answered and said, "Here is the king's speech."